I want to welcome you to day 3 of college week. This is a really exciting day for me. I love talking about testing, and we have an amazing guest speaker today. If you are a parent and you're feeling confused about what is the right approach to SAT and ACT testing, you are not alone. With so many schools going test optional and also changing back to test scores required, it's really tough to know what's best for your student. So we're here to answer all of those questions for you today. So today's session, the SAT, ACT playbook, prep scores, test optional strategies is perfect to answer all of those questions. We're going to cover how to decide if your teen should submit test scores, what test optional really means, and how to build a smart, effective test prep plan. So let's dive in. Before we dive in, I want to introduce Pete. Pete Pecoraro. Am I saying your last name? I don't know if I've ever
Got
said
it.
your last name.
That's right,
Oh,
Pecoraro.
Pecoraro. Fantastic. So Pete is one of the test prep tutors at Educational Connections. He is a professional development specialist, a former high school teacher, and has 12 years helping students maximize their scores on the SAT and ACT. So Pete, before we dive in, can you just sort of give me like a brief synopsis about how you help students prepare for the SAT or the ACT?
A brief synopsis. I would say it like this. I try to create a roadmap for the student, a blueprint for success, and break down the test into their component pieces, the building blocks of each,
Mhm.
and then dig into those building blocks in a very detailed and intense manner to improve. My feeling is if I can improve each one of those blocks or even some of them, score goes up, and that's
Yep.
what I seek to do. I always say that you if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So we
Hmm.
so we have to know where we're going, and
Hmm.
that's what to me that's what test prep is all about. I see my role as kind of facilitating the blueprint for how do we attack these tests.
I agree. And I appreciate sort of the summary of that. I'll tell you when I'm talking with students, I know we're going to talk a little bit about test prep later on, but I was just meeting with someone earlier this week and they were talking about how to approach test prep. And the first thing the student said to me, and I love their honesty, was, I don't even know where to start. And I said, well, that's one of the benefits of having a test prep coach because they can lay out a roadmap for you of how to start, where to start, and break things down for you leading up to your testing date. And I think some students feel like that a little bit, like I think I can do this on my own, but I don't even know how to start it. And if they're feeling that way, it's great to have someone giving them like this is what we should be working on and tailoring an approach that works best for that student. So
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah,
preach. I preach all the time. Small victories. Small
small bit.
victories lead to bigger victories. So you have to break it down. It's too enormous a task to attack at once. So you have to you know break it apart into its building blocks.
Yeah, I feel the same way about college counseling. Okay, so let's get into today's topic. I'm going to start the presentation by walking through parents and anyone who's on the call with the role that test scores play in admissions today. And then I'm going to have Pete talk about the actual tests and, prepping and what the tests involve and things like that. So let me start with the role of test scores in 2026 and beyond. This is really a topic that is legitimately ever changing. It's really difficult to say, here's exactly what you should do because it is really changing every year. And, we saw a lot of changes happen around the pandemic when a lot of schools went to test optional. And now we're seeing a change for some schools going back to test score required or test score preferred. So there's all of these sort of terms out there. So I want to start with that. So if a school says that their test score required, you must submit test scores as part of your application. That is a requirement. They will not consider your application complete until those test scores are received. If a school is test optional, you can submit test scores, but you don't have to submit test scores. So you can elect on your application that you do not want your test scores considered. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about test optional schools and how optional are they really. And then the third category is test blind. And this is where schools will tell you upfront, we do not consider test scores as part of the application process. So you cannot submit them. They're not part of the application process. They only consider the academic transcript and other metrics, but not test scores. So as I said, we're really starting to see some changes for colleges that were test optional because there was a lack of testing available during the pandemic to now going back to test scores required. And I get this question, families, why? Why are they going back? Standardized tests have been found to be a good indicator of how well a student can perform in college. Not for every student, but for many students, this can be a good indicator. And test scores are also a great way for colleges to differentiate students who look the same academically in a competitive landscape. So if you're an admissions officer and you have two students whose transcripts look exactly the same, you have one spot left, but you have these standardized test scores that will help differentiate who is going to receive that one remaining spot over the other one. And, it's very important that students look at the policy of each school in submitting their applications. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. I saw many changes in the test score policies from last year to this year, and I'm anticipating even more from this year to next year. So when I'm working with students, that's one of the things we concentrate quite a bit on. And I'll cover how we do that later on to determine if they should submit scores to each school. So the next question I get often is, how do these scores impact an application? High test scores can boost your chances of admission. I mean, that's just very clear. But some schools require test scores for merit consideration, for honors consideration. So it really is important to sort of read the policies at each school. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And before we really get into your slides, Pete, I do want to let families know that schools don't favor the SAT over the ACT. Every college and university will accept either of them. So you can really feel confident that you can pick which one is the best fit for your child. You don't have to worry about what is the best fit for the university. And I think that's really an important place to start. Okay, Pete, let's discuss the differences between the SAT and the ACT. Can you walk us through that?
I would summarize from a high line point of view, from like the big picture point of view. I, I I would say the SAT is the harder test. It's more dense, more complex, more critical thinking involved. The ACT is the faster test. I think it's less, it's more student friendly, and it's easier to deal with its presentation, but you have to move. You have to keep moving. It's more of a hustle. The SAT, like I said, it kind of leans toward a more critical thinking, uh, more difficult passages. And I could see somebody saying, "Well, why would I do that?" I mean, it's like you're telling me that it's harder, but you get more time. You get more time to deal with it. A lot of students would say, "I understand that it's harder, but I don't like to be rushed." So that's kind of like the big picture. The SAT questions for reading and writing are definitely shorter. You don't get like a full length article, a full length essay. It's a paragraph. And on the ACT reading passages, it is a full length article. It fits on one side of one sheet of a piece of paper. So sometimes the length of something that can bog you down. Many students will feel like I'll do something harder if it's shorter, and if you give me time to do so.
Mm-hmm.
There on the ACT, there's an optional science section as well. So that's not a part of the SAT at all, and has never been so. On the ACT, it is optional, so that's not a requirement, but it's there as a subject. The SAT is adaptive. So the second module of reading and writing, or the second module math, is dependent on your performance on the first module. So if you
Mm-hmm.
do quite well, then the second module adapts and gets harder. So that's an algorithm that's built into the SAT. The ACT is not adaptive in any way. Everybody gets the same test at the same time. So these are some of the key differences. The ACT, still, you could still take it as a paper and pencil test with a booklet. The
Hmm.
SAT does not have that option. It's 100% digital, so you will be taking it on a device. Bottom line, you get more time per question on any part of the SAT compared to the ACT. More time per question across the board.
So
So
it's
we'll get into
interesting.
some other differences.
The length
Say
of the
again.
time for the test is very similar. It's just the number of questions that they have to answer
Right.
in that time frame is different. And it, I kind of hear you with the positives and negatives of each, and I think it just really depends on the student too and how they want to approach it. I like the way that you explained it. I think that was really helpful.
There are pros and cons in each. Every student is different. Some students warm up to one or the other. Like as you
Hmm.
said right at the outset, they're accepted at all colleges. That's the biggest myth that I encounter like almost every day
I
is
know.
that. So we've dispelled that myth. But these are some of the key differences, and you can see the timings like on our slide there: 2 hours 24 versus 2 hour 20.
Sure.
Both tests have made great effort to kind of like be similar from that in
Hmm.
that way.
Hmm. Pete,
More
one of the
questions
things I
though.
hear from my students often some of them will take both, some of them take the PSAT, or some just stick in a lane, and we're going to talk about that as well. But one of the things I hear from my students, and I would love your feedback on this, is many of them will say that the SATs, although it has fewer questions, they have to think about the question, maybe read it twice before answering the question, because they want to make sure that they're understanding what the question is asking. As opposed to the ACT, they find that it's similar to the way their high school tests are, where, oh, here's the question I'm answering, here's the question I'm answering. So they are able to go through it more quickly because the questions are being asked in a more direct way. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, totally agree with that. SAT, think of it as kind of like it's dense and complex. The in order to you have to unpack the information. You have to
Mm,
analyze the details.
hmm.
ACT is a more I feel is a more student friendly, more curriculum based test. It
Interesting.
resembles school more closely. So I
Hmm.
feel like on ACT reading, it's more of a hide and go seek exercise. It's like if I can find it, I can use my Where's Waldo eye to find the piece of information. Then what I
Right.
need is right is pretty much right there. That's the dominant trend. Where the
Okay.
SAT requires more assembly of information.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so
Interesting.
that's a big difference.
Interesting. That's really helpful. So let's break each of them down. I know you gave us a little bit of information, but I think really if parents can understand what is in the component for each of the score sections for each test, I think that will be helpful for them in determining which might be a good fit for their student. So let's do the ACT first. So can you talk us through this chart?
Absolutely. So it starts with the order that the subjects go in is always the same. We'll go English, math, reading, science. Science is last, and now science is optional. On English, it's largely grammar and punctuation and sentence structure. The rules of grammar. Do you know how to use a colon, semicolon, dash, comma, apostrophe? Those types of questions. ACT math is broader than it covers more topics than SAT math, but
Hmm.
in a less complicated and equational way. SAT math is more it feels more equational. ACT math is broader, but it's pretty much topics you would encounter in geometry, algebra one, and algebra two, and even in front of algebra, like pre-algebra, adding fractions,
Mm,
some things that you encounter like in the early grades.
okay.
We spoke a little bit about reading. That comes third on the ACT. There's 4 essays on the ACT. It's a full length essay, about 80 to 85 lines of text for the reading passages. The topics are always the same. It goes fiction, social science, humanities, natural science. 9 questions out of that essay, based on. Whereas on the SAT, 1 paragraph, 1 question.
Okay.
On
Mm,
the ACT, 1 essay controls 9 questions.
okay.
Um, they can be attacked in kind of, as I said, in a Where's Waldo kind of way, but that's how ACT reading presents. 4 full length essays, and the subjects are predictable, and they will go in that
Okay.
order. ACT science, this is kind of like this is the most interesting one of all. I feel like science is kind of like somewhat of a misnomer. We think about science, our classroom subjects, biology, chemistry,
Right.
physics. very little of that surfaces on ACT science at all. Instead, it's interpreting charts, graphs, and tables, data analysis. Are you the type of person who can go into a chart, graph, or table, find a piece of information, and answer questions about it? If so,
Mm,
that's what ACT science is like.
okay.
They invoke a little bit of common knowledge on like prior knowledge, very little. Almost all of it comes from looking at and analyzing the charts, graphs, and tables. I would feel better if they would call it scientific analysis or something like that, or data analysis.
I
But it's been science
agree.
for the longest time.
Right.
That's what it
Right.
is. So that's if you take it as an option, that's what you have. You should know that that's what you're getting into.
Right.
If
Right.
you're kind of worried about, it's like, well, I don't really like chemistry. I don't like physics. Many of my students tell me physics is where fun goes to die. Don't worry about it.
Right.
There won't be any of that hardcore classroom knowledge
I
on
think
ACT science.
that's really important to know because I agree. I think the title kind of scares students away. And any student that I have who's interested in really anything STEM related, in business even,
Yeah,
I'm encouraging them to take the science portion. There are colleges when they made the science portion optional that came out right last fall and said we're requiring it. A
yeah,
lot of the technical schools and STEM-based schools,
sure.
like it's a requirement, but I really encourage students to take the science portion, unless maybe they're going to be a musical theater major. I don't really think it's necessary, but for
It does
many
depend.
students, I do recommend it. And I think knowing that information would make it much less intimidating for the students
If you
to
really
add that
to add
on.
on to that, to if this is kind of like everybody worries about the science a little bit because there's this disconnect. I think of more of it as not as science as but as applied reading. What are
Mm,
you applying your reading skills to? Well, to charts, graphs, and tables.
charts and graphs,
It
right?
used to it, it used to be called scientific reasoning. It used to be called
Mm,
scientific reasoning about
yes,
20
I
or 30
remember
years
that.
ago. They should have
Yeah,
kept that. They should have
yeah.
kept that name because that's what it really is.
I'm embarrassed to tell you that I actually remember that. That's okay, so let's talk about the SAT now. Can you fill us in a little bit on how that's structured?
Yeah, that circle looks a little less complicated because there's like two
It does.
hemispheres. That's somewhat deceiving, but it's largely true. There's two broad categories, reading and writing, but there's two modules: reading and writing one, reading and writing two, and then math one and math two. So four kind of like sections, but two broad subject categories. The reading and writing, I feel like is a grossly underestimate what's involved. And when I teach reading and writing, I break it down into what I call the six skills of reading and writing: vocabulary, vocabulary and context, main idea, main purpose of a paragraph, data analysis, a chart, graph, or table, and a paragraph that you kind of have to work through.
Hmm.
Grammar, transitional words, that's skill number five. And then synthesis of bullet points at the end is skill number six. Bullet points are just like little notes, like little brief notes. The student has taken the following notes. It's not even a
Mm,
paragraph, maybe just a sentence or two. You have in a
okay.
bullet point form, and then a question that follows that. Those are the six skills of reading and writing. The writing part of it is the grammar, and the transitional words, making decisions like should I use however or therefore, or
Hmm.
nevertheless, in addition, for example,
Hmm.
making a decision on that type of phraseology. Math is covers everything up to and including algebra two, and even some pre-calc wouldn't hurt on SAT math. It's highly equational. On the SAT math, there are questions where you don't get uh, answer choices. On the ACT, you get A, B, C, and D all the time.
Oh.
But on SAT math, you may be required to enter in a a number,
Mm,
a numerical. You have to type in the
interesting.
number where there won't be answer choice options. So that always
Okay.
kind of is like a little bit kind of worrisome for students. It's like I can't guess,
Right.
and you can't do like a one out of four. Well, at least I could guess. Some questions do not offer that.
Okay.
Desmos
Okay.
calculators built into SAT math too, so that's a big helpful tool.
Okay. Great. Let's talk about some common questions we get about testing. I think these are very common, and I think we already have a question in the Q&A about super scoring. I'll take this first one. How does super scoring work? And super scoring, for those of you who don't know what that is if a student takes a test multiple times. Many colleges in the country, I would say probably 80 to 85% of the colleges in the US super score. If a student takes a test multiple times. They will take, for example, SAT, the highest reading score and the highest math score, and put them together, even if they weren't taken on the same test date. So that would result in a super score. Whereas I took my reading score from my December SAT and my math score from my March SAT, and now I have the super score, and that is what I'm, sending and presenting to colleges. And many colleges will do that. Will super score. Pete, how many times do you recommend that a student take a, a test? What is your recommendation?
It's a highly individual decision, but I would say the dominant trend is to plan on taking it 2 to 3 times. First time is a baseline. It's new. Anything new is kind of has that air of mystery or stress associated with it.
Hmm.
So that helps establish your baseline and gets you accustomed to the testing conditions, the timing, the way the room feels, all of that. The second, and then when you have that first time, then you can zero in on the strengths and weaknesses um, from the score itself.
Right,
Plan on taking it a second time to zero to improve upon those
right.
weaknesses, capitalize on your strengths, buttress your weaknesses. So the second time, and then the second time you take it, it's not new.
Hmm.
So chances are, I mean, the dominant trend that I see is the second and third times almost always go up for students for the reasons I just cited.
Right.
So I think that's a good game plan is kind of like get your baseline, your improvement, and then perhaps even more improvement when you take it a third time. I've had students take a test many times, but I think there's a point of diminishing returns on just about any human endeavor that once
Right.
you get to taking it the sixth, seventh time, I've had students fit that profile. The chances of seeing a meaningful improvement are is very low. It's
Right. I
very
agree.
rare. I will say this too. It's very rare for a student to be a one and done. It could
Hmm.
happen.
Hmm.
It was more common like when I was growing up in the Stone Age. One and done is a rarity event nowadays. So that kind
Hmm.
of tells us something as well too, that it's kind of built for a 2 to 3 time kind of
Right.
rhythm or pattern.
Right. I tell students the same thing. I think 2 to 3 times is very reasonable as long as they've completed Algebra 2, and they're in their junior year. I normally recommend that they take SAT or ACT in the fall of their junior year, maybe November, December, see how they do, and then plan on taking it again in March of their junior year. And then they still have that summer between junior and senior year to take it a third time if they want to. I feel very strongly that students should not be taking SATs or ACTs in fall of their senior year. I have had students do it because they're chasing a certain score and
Yeah,
trying to get there, but that is a very difficult time to be submitting applications and taking testing and prepping and also senior
yeah.
year. And then it also puts you in a situation where you're holding submitting your applications because you're waiting to get your test scores back. And
Yeah, I was just going to
so,
say, I think what
yeah,
drives that is just the deadline process, of
right,
colleges themselves, where there's
right.
kind of like there's a discipline that's being forced upon you there with your
Yes.
date and your financial aid and your application that
Right.
it's really geared up. There are exceptions to
Yeah.
everything in life. I mean, but I think
Sure.
the junior year that's the year
The year.
to tackle
Right.
these college entrance exams.
Well, and the other thing, Pete, is that, when I'm working with students, I say something similar, I think, to what you say, in that if you're going to take it a number of times, you can't prep the same way every time and expect different results. So after you've taken it even 2 times, I'll say, okay, if you've been test prepping on your own and you're going to take it a third time, how are you going to mix it up? How are you going to change it for this next cycle, so that you're not just doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result in there?
Right.
So really layering in a test prep coach, or if they were doing group test prep, maybe now doing one-on-one test prep, something like that to change it up because I think that that's important. So do you recommend students take, like, how do you help them decide if they should take the SAT or the ACT? Do you ever recommend that they take both?
This is by far the most common question, and I that I get like regularly, almost daily. I would say it like this: now that the environment that we're in, most students take the SAT or PSAT, preliminary
Mm-hmm.
SAT, as part of their high school experience. So there are exceptions to that too. There are private schools, there are Catholic schools, but I'd say
Right.
the dominant trend is you'll have some familiarity with the PSAT. You take it in school. So that gives you that's a very good starting point to think about it, that test. How did it feel? Did you feel like you could that went okay for you? Could you lean into that and kind of master that? Or was it a
Mm-hmm.
horrible experience? It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to ever see that test ever again.
Mm-hmm.
My point is start with the SAT. Start with the SAT and see and think about how that went for you. How did your PSAT go? What did you think of the style? What did you think of the questions? Do you feel like you could grapple with that or work within those parameters? The other thing about the SAT that I like is that they do have a lot of practice tests on their through their app, through the College Board. Right
Right.
now, I think there's 6 tests out there. You can get a score, and then and there's a way to kind of get that's easy. It's
Mm-hmm.
you go through the app, you take it, the score comes back. I could see leaning into that because the technology is kind of like has been more developed on the SAT side. The ACT
Right.
doesn't quite have that yet. So kind of from a tech point of view, I feel like you could lean into the SAT. It's a very good place to start. Is that the
Mm-hmm.
end of the road? Not necessarily. You take that and say that math was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Those reading passages, I don't like reading something by Herman Melville from 1857. It's like I don't want to
Right.
ever see that
Right.
again. Well,
Right.
then that opens the door. Let's talk about other things. Let's talk about the ACT. Let's talk about
Yes.
other ways of going to college. But I'd say
Mm-hmm.
the dominant trend start with the SAT. You're going to start with it anyway with the
The
PSAT
PSAT. Right.
as kind of like a high school
Mm-hmm.
requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think it's very rare that I would run into say to take both because they're different enough that I think then you're diluting the
Right.
effectiveness of if you spread your time across both. One question that nobody's ever asked me, and I thought about it the other day, is how much overlap is there between the
Mm-hmm.
two? I would say, after years of doing this, it's not like a nice clean number. It's not like
Yes.
mathematically measurable, but I would
Right.
say that there's about a 60% overlap between the two,
Mm-hmm.
between SAT and ACT, just topics and material. Well, that
Right.
means there's a 40% that doesn't overlap.
Mm-hmm.
That's different enough to say,
Right.
well, maybe I should get your
Yes.
lane and kind of like work that
Pick.
test hard
Yes.
until you're kind of done.
Yeah.
So
That's what I do tell students that, as they're trying to decide, I'm like, okay, well, once we get to a decision, let's pick a lane and stay in it. Because trying to prep for both of them is a different type of prep, and you don't want to divide your time between it.
yeah,
I do
and
tell
dilute
students
your
the same
effectiveness.
thing. Exactly. Take the PSAT. How do you feel about it? I just had a student I met with over the weekend, and they were saying, I mean, it was okay. The SAT was okay, but I don't know. I've never taken a practice ACT. So I said, let's take one. So, now they're taking the practice ACT, and then they're really making that decision about how to move forward after taking both of them.
Right.
So sometimes
Yeah.
that's helpful for students too.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I mean, it's kind of like, it's Coke and
Right.
Pepsi. I mean, so well,
Right.
you know, how
Right.
do you know? I mean, maybe try that. And it's like I like that better. But I
Yes.
feel like just the way kind of like the way school is set up and the way the two tests are set up, I feel like a very good starting point
Sure.
is the SAT. And of course
SAT. I agree.
you can take fork of the road off of that. No problem.
Right. So I did mention earlier, and then Pete has mentioned as well, that schools don't have a favorite test that you can really do, either the SAT or the ACT. I know this is very, very small font here, but I did want to show that this is called the concordance table, and this is what colleges will use to take SATs or ACTs and sort of equate them so they can put them in one review process on their side. So it does sort of give them the ability to look at either one that you send and still feel confident about, how they're doing their review process.
And it also gives the test taker a way to know, like if they're kind of like in the middle of that decision, it's like,
Yes.
I just got like a 1200. What would that look like on the
What does that
ACT?
look
There's
like? Yes.
there's a way to, and you say, oh wow, it's like there is kind of like one kind of is measures higher than the other. There is a
Yes.
way to know that. That's what that table is
Yeah.
all
Right. And when I worked in admissions, I used it all the time because the school
about.
that I
I
worked
bet.
for, I mean, the
I
school I
bet.
worked for, I would say probably, 60 to 70% of the students sent SATs, but so that was still a good, 30 to 40% were sending ACTs. But in order to sort of make them equal in my head, I would often go to the table so that I could make sure that I was really being fair and making sure
Right.
I was considering the scores appropriately and making that admission decision. Okay, let's talk about prep. When do you recommend that students do test prep and how far
I would
out from
say,
their exam date?
yeah, great. I'd say the first thing is try and zero in on your test date. The tests are offered regularly about every other month for both of them. So
Mm,
once you have that kind of like locked into that part of the calendar, then I would say your prep for that chosen test date 3 to 6 months ahead of that
okay,
date. If you have
okay.
ambitious goals, you're trying to get like, big time improvement, selective colleges, highly competitive. That
Hmm.
may require like a 6 month kind of ramp.
Okay.
Um, some students don't have that as kind of like their as part of their game plan. But I think everybody would benefit by getting started at least 3 months
Three
ahead of the
months.
test date.
Okay.
I have students who kind of like get started very late, that like even a month ahead. You work with that everything, but
Sure, sure.
more optimally, I'd say 3 to 6 months,
Sure.
depending on your goals.
Yes, yes. Okay. And is there a certain like time, like when should they be doing it in their high school years?
I'd say, well, definitely, you don't. I don't see students starting or even needing, or it would not even be perhaps even advisable to start until your sophomore year is complete.
Okay.
Could
Hmm.
one start in kind of the summer prior to the fall of the junior year? That's a great time to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great time to start because you'll probably be less scheduled
Yes.
at that time. But I think it all kicks in what kind of like in the fall of one's junior year, and even the
Okay.
winter. I mean, you can get
Hmm.
in the winter of your junior year, Christmas. You're on Christmas break. The holidays are
Yeah.
done. Then you're getting more in
Start
kind of
get
the
going.
winter spring.
Yes.
One of kind of like in that general time frame.
Okay.
Um, but if you're but if you're looking to get a kind of like a leg up, I'd say this summer after your sophomore year is complete is a great time to start if you
Right.
can,
Hmm.
and if you want to do so. If not,
Yeah.
then I'd say the most students do start the fall of their junior year
And
and
what
pick a
if we
test
have
date like
right. If we have parents on the call who are parents of juniors and they haven't done any test prep yet, it's not too late, right?
it's not too late. It's not too late. I'd start kind of like thinking about rolling up your sleeves and get
Yeah, getting into it. Yeah.
and get on it. But it's not too late. I mean, we're in Feb. This is a lot of students start. It's not too late. It's Feb. Today's like
Sure.
Feb 3, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Fourth.
They're
Yeah.
Feb 4. So their
Yeah.
tests available in the spring and early summer. So there's still
Okay.
room for you
Good.
um,
Good.
for
Okay.
to get you start your test prep journey.
Yeah. Start a plan. Okay, so I know you've taught test prep classes in the past. I know you do one-on-one prep with the students through educational connections. Can you tell us about the differences between those two, and are there benefits of one over the other?
Sure, I highly favor. To me, I don't even think it's even a close call anymore. I've taught a test prep in a classroom setting, 20 or 30
Hmm.
students, and a small group setting, 3 to 5 students, 2 to 3 students. What we do and this is the type of tutoring that I work on is one-to-one attention. The
Yeah.
benefit there is I feel like you're answerable when it's one-on-one. It's easy to deflect when you're in a group. It's like, well, it's like uh, I didn't do the homework, but nobody else did either, So it's kind of like
Hmm.
that. Whereas if it's one-on-one, you're kind of like reportable. You're reportable. I'm going to
Yes.
ask you, like, okay, how'd the homework go? Did you do it? And then, but above that, kind of like installing a discipline upon the student, you get to ask
Hmm.
your questions your way. It's all about
Good
this
point.
is individualized to you. What do you need? Do you need a lot of
Hmm.
math? Then that's harder to do in a classroom where all the individual needs are different. But
Correct.
if it's one-on-one, I'm gonna look at kind of like your profile and say, what is your top priority? What's second?
Right.
What's third? That differs
Right.
from student to student. And I always say
Sure.
that one-on-one tutoring is a wonderful opportunity to be selfish. It's like
Mm,
this
I
is
like
for
that.
you. Nobody else is in the
Yes.
room. We're having a conversation. You ask your
Right.
questions your way, as many as you like. That's the beauty of it. That's what we do. I insist on using official, actual practice tests, not third-party documents. I mean, they have a role, but
Hmm.
as often as possible, official ACTs, official SATs, structured sessions, homework, new material, solo. We work together. You go free agent. You try some things on your own. We come back together, and then we kind of like repeat that cycle, that rhythm, over and over
Amazing.
again. I feel that that's how winning is done. That
Yeah.
that template, that
That's
that arrangement.
that's super helpful. I know we're kind of running a little bit long here, and I want to leave some room for some Q&A as well. We already have a number of questions in there, but I would like to go over quickly, what test score submission. I get a lot of questions about this as a college counselor. Should I submit my test scores? And, for me, my answer is often yes to this school and no to this school. So it really will depend on the school. So what students really need to do is take their test scores and then consider them against what the colleges have admitted in the past. So what I do is take the students' test scores and then look at each individual college to determine if we're going to submit. I look at the average test scores that they've had in the past. I look at how many students have submitted test scores in the past to that college. That gives me a really good indicator of whether a school is truly test optional. And I also look at the students' test scores in um, comparison to their high school transcript. So if I think those test scores are adding something to the application, we send them. If they're taking away from the strength of their academic transcript, then we don't. So there's 3 or 4 different factors that we will use in making that determination. And I think a lot of families sort of go into it thinking either I'm sending them to all or I'm sending them to none of them. But that isn't really sort of the way that it plays out because the competitiveness of each school is different. In general, just so people have a takeaway, I typically recommend that a student submit test scores if they fall within the upper 50% of the middle 50% that school has admitted in the past. Now, that being said, have I had students send scores if they fall in the lower half? I have. If I think they're adding something to their application, if they have a very strong verbal and they want to go into writing, that makes sense, even though their math is a little bit lower. So that pulled them out of the middle 50%. So lots of sort of nuances that we have to discuss there. And then there's also questions about whether test schools are really test optional, because some will say they're test optional, but then when you look at the number of enrolled first year students who submitted test scores, when we're seeing a school that says they're test optional, but 80% of their incoming class submitted test scores, that school is really test score preferred. And so, this is a very basic chart of some of the schools that I work with quite a bit. If a student has test scores within the middle 50% of Virginia Tech's, I'm sending those scores. For JMU, I may not send them unless they're in the top half of the middle 50%. So there's a lot of sort of questions around that. And I usually just have a whole meeting on that with students just to go down through their college list and make those decisions because it's sort of complicated. And I want them to understand why I'm making the recommendations that I'm making. And then, of course, there is also the test blind category. The entire University of California system is test blind, so there's no decisions there. Hampshire College, Washington State, but we are seeing more schools that are leaning more towards that test score required, and we'll continue to see that over the next year. So before we go to Q&A, I do want to just remind everybody that tomorrow we are having a Ask Us Anything. Mary Beth from yesterday and I will be back. So we're excited to answer any questions that you might have and make sure that you leave College Week feeling really confident that you know how to move forward best. So we have that time set aside, and I'm looking forward to that. I love questions and answering all of those. And then as well, before we get to the Q&A, I just want to remind everybody that we know navigating your child's college journey and test prep and test questions, it can sometimes be challenging, and it would be helpful to have someone to talk through those things with and sort of guide the process, whether that be a college counseling coach or a test prep coach. So if you're interested in learning more about any of that, you can scan the QR code and be connected to one of our amazing education specialists. They're all fantastic. Pete, if there's any families on the call today that are interested in working with you for test prep, do you have room available on your roster, or are you at capacity at this point?
Close to capacity, but I still have room for probably 2 or 3 students. It depends
Okay,
on certain days are better than others. That's
sure.
all kind of like based on the students' availability and mine. But there's still I still have a little bit of room to
Okay,
to help a student.
to put them in. Okay, fantastic. I always like people to know in case they want to ask specifically for someone, and it's nice during webinars that they get to know you a little bit and would know if
Sure.
you're a good fit for their child. Okay, let's go to the Q&A and see if we can get a few of these done. So Pete, if someone's taking the AT optional science portion, how is that
Mhm.
reflected into their composite score?
Great question. It's not part of the composite score at all. The composite will be built from English, math, and reading, those 3 subjects. ACT science is a separate column, a separate number on the report, but it is not part of the calculation that the ACT for the ACT's official score. So it's
Okay,
truly optional in that aspect. Now, I will say, and I'm sure you will kind of like agree with me, the colleges can do internally can do a lot of things. You know, they can build a score out of all kinds of information, but the ACT itself won't. It's just going to be
correct.
shown as a separate numerical piece of information off to the side.
Okay. And I think we're moving into a good place now. Last year, there were some students who took the old version of the ACT that had science required, and then the new version. That's the difficult years for colleges.
Yep.
But now that we're rolling into the next application season, I think it'll be really clean on the admission side.
Totally agree. Some of the
Uh,
complexities have been, we're past that.
we're past that.
Thank God.
I'm glad this person asked this question, and we haven't really talked about. And I know I work with a lot of students who have ADHD or learning differences or accommodations for
Mhm.
extended time, those types of
Yep.
things. So I think I'm going to ask one question that hasn't been answered, and then the question they actually asked. Do you recommend an ACT or an SAT for students who have ADHD or learning differences, or do you find that they do well on either test?
It's a great question. I would say this: if a student has the accommodation for time,
Yes.
and I guess that's a big if, but many students who have ADHD or have been diagnosed do get the accommodation for time. Let's just say that
Mm-hmm.
that's happening. Then I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend you should give serious consideration to the ACT if you're in that
Okay.
situation. Why? Because as I mentioned before, the ACT, the thing that kind of like is a con there is you have to hustle along. You have to keep moving. Well, what if we
Right.
remove that time? What if we remove that time management aspect out of it a little bit for with the extra time that you might receive as accommodation? I'm not
Right.
saying that that's the answer, but what I am saying is it should definitely be, you should give it serious consideration.
Okay.
I
That's
do think
helpful.
even let's say you don't have the accommodation for time, I still think you should give the ACT serious consideration because it's more student friendly. You
Mm-hmm.
can use there are you can use kind of like hide and go seek and rules. It's a more teachable, coachable test than the
Right.
SAT. I'm not
Okay.
saying it's better. I'm just saying it's different.
Right. It's
So,
different.
though that's how I would answer that.
Okay. And from the college perspective, I will tell you when the scores are received at the colleges, they have no indication if a student received extended time. So that is not sent as part of the score report. It's only the scores are sent. So on the college side, it doesn't matter either way. Okay, do you consider the PSAT at times that a student has taken? Do you consider PSAT as times that the student has taken the test? Okay, so they're saying, do you count the
Oh,
PSAT and the number of times that you recommend them to take the test? And my assumption is no.
yeah, you're right. I say no. That's not part of kind of like that 2 to 3 times that we were talking about. It's
Hmm.
preliminary. So it's not exactly like that. It's easier, but it's practice or preliminary. And so I
Correct.
don't count it into that kind of like that chalk up of 2 to 3 times. And the other thing too is you'll have had less math at that
Yes.
time.
Right.
So I
Right.
think the clock, the counter starts counting after PSAT. Great question.
After. Yeah. And then this family also has a great question. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'd love to hear your answer for this. If a student is not taking Algebra 2 until the junior year, do you recommend waiting until spring of junior year to take that first official SAT or ACT?
I would say yes. I would
Me too.
I would say yes.
Me
That's
too.
the way to look at it. You just need to have more math under your belt.
Hmm.
So and the more you have, the more and the as the maturity of your math skills grow,
Yes.
you're just going to be poised. You're in a better position for that test.
Sure.
So
Sure. How does one get an accommodation for extended time on the SAT?
good question. I'm not an expert on this, but I know it well enough to know you start with your guidance counselor
Yes, that's what I
at
always say
school.
too.
Start with your guidance counselor, and they're experts at knowing how to apply, how to substantiate. You have to substantiate the need. So there's a whole process for that.
Hmm.
So start with guidance, and they'll help you hit the milestones that are needed to receive the accommodation.
To receive that accommodation. Great. Okay. We have one more question. Oh, and I think we can fit it in. So my junior is scheduled to take the SAT in March and in school with the whole junior class. And I actually love when schools do that. We see that sometimes in March and sometimes in April, and that makes it a lot easier for students if they can't accommodate a Saturday test. So, should I sign up to submit my test scores to colleges in March or wait until June? I'm confused about sending the timing from College Board. That is actually a great question. So, given that timing, this would be my recommendation would be just take the March scores and then take the June ones because a number of colleges now, this is another thing that we navigate with students. Many colleges now will take self-reported scores as part of your application process. And you don't need to send official scores to that school unless you are going to enroll. So when I'm working with a student, we're in that are we submitting test scores spot. I will make a big Google Doc for them. Here's all the schools you're applying to. Here's where you're submitting test scores to. Here's what schools take self-reported and what require official scores. And making sure we build a timeline that allows those official scores to be sent to the school before the application deadline. So I think it's completely fine to wait to submit those scores to colleges until after you receive that all of those scores. You may end up going test optional to schools and may not want to submit test scores there. I will tell you if you do send test scores to a college and then elect to go test optional, they will not look at them. They block them for the review process, even if they have them in their system, so they do not come into the admissions review. So some students say, I know I'm applying to these 5 schools, I'm just going to send them. And that's okay. Go ahead and send them like that. But many schools now have gone to self-reported test scores, which is really interesting. But there is a cost to send it to every school as well. So that's why I think some schools have done that to not make it be cost prohibitive to some families to be able to submit those. So that is a question that you can kind of tackle after you've received your scores and you have a better indication of whether you're going to submit those scores. Hopefully I answered that question. Okay, and then one sneaked in, so we'll answer that one. Do you recommend taking geometry over your freshman summer? I wouldn't say I'd recommend it unless it's not fitting into your schedule well.
Yeah,
Most students
I
will
don't
take it
see
sophomore year.
I don't see any special strategy that would kind of center around geometry itself.
Right.
Most students take that in their freshman or sophomore year,
Hmm.
unless there's a special situation you're struggling with geometry, or you just want to get a leg up. I mean, some students want to do that. They'll get a
Right.
leg up during the summer to be readier for a class. But I don't see anything that would kind of like as a test prep strategy bring
Right.
kind of geometry into the any special handling, any special
Right.
handling.
Right.
Yeah,
I guess maybe the benefit, maybe they're saying is taking geometry over the summer so that they can take algebra 2 in their sophomore year as opposed to
that would
junior
be
year.
yeah. If that's kind of like the what you're trying to the
Lean
game plan,
into it.
that I could see the
Hmm.
sensibility of that.
I think it would really depend on the student and their math, the strength of their math background, and the quality of the course that's being taught over the summer. Sometimes I have a student who struggles in a certain subject area and they prefer to take it in the summer so they can concentrate just on that as opposed to like, all of the other things they're working on in the school year. I think that might be a really individual answer depending on the student.
Yeah.
Well, this
And
was
students do
great.
algebra two during the summer ahead of
Mhm.
their because they feel like
They
I
want
just
to get
need
that.
to I want to I need to
Hmm.
kind of like hone my skills
Right.
ahead of like the class itself starting.
This is one of
So
I talk about class selection a lot with students every January. I'm asking, what are
yeah,
you taking? Are they
yeah,
asking you? Just to
yeah,
make sure that they're selecting things and making sure they have room in their schedule to take all the things that they want to take. And sometimes knocking out health or PE or things like that, econ
yeah,
over the
yeah.
summer.
I could see that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
right.
that's more typical, I hear, than a traditional core subject. So,
Yeah,
but if you haven't done well in geometry and want to retake it in the summer, that's a good option too. So,
yeah.
lots of possibilities. But thank you for joining us today, Pete. I love College Week, and it's so exciting to talk to everyone and really get your
Thank you for having me.
expertise. And was super helpful today. So, if anyone is interested in joining Mary Beth and I tomorrow, we'll be doing our live Q&A. Please come on in and ask us any questions, and we're happy to tackle anything that might be remaining or confusing for you. So you walk away from this week feeling really confident about how to move forward in your child's college search and application journey. So thanks so much, Pete. And I appreciate everyone joining us today. Hope you have a great day.